but I'm still a little suspicious about the timing and how it's all rolled out here.
Yeah, it's been about 20 plus years, man, and they finally doing something about it, man.
Oh, 27, brother. 27.
They say time heals all wounds, but for Tupac's family, the scars have only gotten deeper. Nearly 3 decades after that night in Las Vegas, whispers about who was really behind his end refused to die down. And now those whispers have a voice. Tupac's own brother, Mopreme Shakur. And he has stepped forward, and he's not mincing words.
Watching us, all up us. But then, actually, not a cop. You know, so the diehards is going to hate him forever. Even though the cops were wrong, in the wrong.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because I have a lot of people that feel like that's the reason why they didn't, even solve his and it's been 27 years. Because they was like, yo, he's two off-duty cops. He ain't like cops, so why we gonna help him?
Yep.
What he revealed has sent shockwaves through Tupac's fans. In a rare and emotional moment, Mopreme revealed his doubts about Diddy's innocence, openly questioning the music mogul's connection to one of hip-hop's darkest nights. If family blood can't bring themselves to believe the official story, then what does that say about the truth we've all been told? For the longest time, the Las Vegas incident was seen as a tragedy with no loose ends, a superstar takedown, the Strip lit up in neon chaos, and a story that seemed too clear to question. But that final chapter might not be so final after all.
I heard what he said, but, this shit been so chaotic, I ain't know which way to go until you find out more information. And yeah, that was the early 2000s.
Tupac's brother, Mopreme, has come forward with a version of events that flips the old narrative upside down. He claims what the world was told back then wasn't the truth. It was a smokescreen designed to hide something much bigger. According to Mopreme, Tupac wasn't just another victim of that September night. The real story hints that he may have survived, stepping out of the spotlight and into the shadows.
There was a point where was even considering going to Bad Boy before his relationship with Death Row. He's considering going Bad Boy to because he wanted to be on a black label. He wanted to be with his people. He wanted to be with the brothers. You know what I mean? He supported black business. So there was a period where we were all cool. And over time, things happened, started seeing things. And, Biggie was on Puffy's label. So, with them two, it was Puffy calling the shit.
And if that's the case, then the threat he faced wasn't random at all. It was linked to one of hip-hop's most powerful figures, a man whose name keeps surfacing in whispers. That man, Diddy. The story doesn't feel steady anymore. It's as if the ground beneath us is shifting, because this time the words aren't coming from gossip channels or faceless rumor mills. They're coming from the family. Blood. Mopreme Shakur sat across from Piers Morgan, eyes locked on the camera, carrying the same intensity that once defined Tupac himself. When the conversation shifted towards Diddy's constant denials, Mopreme didn't blink. He admitted the truth he carries deep inside, he's never believed those denials. In fact, he's remembered telling Diddy almost 20 years ago, one day the truth will rise to the surface.
Because, law enforcement has problems of its own that is seldom dealt with. So, that trickles down. By the time it's time for us to get justice, that water way down. That water. Everybody know there's corruption in law enforcement.
And now, nearly 3 decades later, it feels like that tide is finally rolling in. Because if Tupac's own brother refuses to believe in Diddy's innocence, how much trust can anyone put in the official version we've been fed? Mopreme has been opening up more about what he really thinks went down, especially after Keefe D's recent arrest. For Mopreme, the timing feels strange. 27 years later, now suddenly there's movement on the case.
There's a lot of curious things about what's been happening. First of all, like everybody knows, the time period, 27 years.
He said the family was never kept in the loop over the years, And with Keefe D giving interviews for decades without consequence, he's not impressed. To him, it feels like the truth was always out there, but ignored.
Well, as far as the family's concerned, there was no, letting us know what was going on all through these years, after 2 years, after 5 years, after 10 years. We weren't kept abreast of things. So it's okay, what's happening? What's really going on? Especially when this dude has been out there.
One of his biggest suspicions is the role of crooked cops. He pointed out that the very night Tupac was shot, Vegas police had already stopped them over something as small as loud music.
I know you was very vocal, man, about the police not doing their job, but how do it make you feel, man? After all these years of Keefe D doing interviews, talking about Tupac getting shot, him doing documentaries, he was on B, and after all these years, he get arrested.
Yeah, I feel mad.
That interaction, plus the LAPD's history with the Shakur family and Tupac's incident of 2 off-duty cops, makes him believe law enforcement had their own grudge. Mopreme even said both Las Vegas and LA officers may have had dirty hands in how the case was handled.
You made a comment saying that you want to see how serious the LAPD is going to take this case because, it's a lot of people that Keefe D name dropped, and you want to see if the, LAPD is going to investigate them. And that's how you can tell, if the LAPD is taking it serious.
Yeah, absolutely.
He also didn't shy away from the puffy question. Since Keefe D himself claimed Diddy put a bounty on Tupac, Mopreme wants to see if investigators take that seriously. For him, ignoring that angle would prove the system still isn't interested in the full truth.
After all these years of Keefe D doing interviews, talking about Tupac getting shot, him doing documentaries, he was on BET, and after all these years, he get arrested.
Yeah, I feel mad still that murdered my brother. First of all, that's that part, because it ain't even have to happen. Because was the type of that will buy you. He will you. He will you, raise the money, and we'll give it to the hood. He will actually, you know what I mean?
One detail can't be dismissed as speculation. In 2008, Diddy himself reached out through radio host Big Boy to arrange a private meeting with Mopreme. Think about that for a moment. One of the most powerful moguls in hip-hop was so unsettled by the whispers that he personally tried to clear the air with Tupac's family.
On the radio out here, and Big Boy, shout out to Big Boy, he hit me up. He was like, yo, man, Puffy, see, they want to talk to you about the whole situation about your brother. And, especially back then, I wanted all the information I could get. And I heard what he said, but, this been so chaotic, I ain't know which way to go until you find out more information. And yeah, that was the early 2000s.
Did Little C say anything to you?
Not that I recall.
Yeah, that sounds like a guy that's guilty, man. Him calling you trying to plead his innocence.
With his crew around him, Diddy repeated over and over that he had no hand in the Vegas incident. Mopreme wasn't swayed. He looked him in the eye and told him, the truth always comes out. Those words echo louder today, because the more time passes, the shakier Diddy's denials appear. If he was so confident back then, why do new cracks keep showing up in the story? Why do the same insiders, the same people close to the events, keep circling back to the same claims?
Yeah, man, he could have been trying to cover his or he could have been sincere. We gonna see.
It's just too many attachments to Diddy, man. At some point, you got to start looking like, yo, what's going on? I mean, when Tupac got shot at Quad, they was talking about Diddy. When Tupac got in Vegas, they was talking about Diddy. At some point, man, you got to start looking at them like, yo, what's going on, yo?
Yeah, and you got people like Kading is out, doing interviews and talking about, it'd be feeling like he got sympathy for Puffy because he was scared.
Mopreme's doubts don't stand alone. They connect to a long trail of whispers that stretches all the way back to 1996. In Los Angeles, it was quietly said that Diddy had a crew to clean things up whenever trouble came knocking. Witnesses who once seemed ready to talk suddenly went quiet because they were terrified of Diddy. Investigations slowed to a crawl. Evidence disappeared. Is that why Tupac's case has remained in limbo for almost 30 years? Is that why only Keffe D has been charged, while so many others walked untouched?
Yeah, he was scared. Yes, I agree. I do agree that he was probably terrified for his life. So if that is the case, it's also quite feasible that he put up money to get killed.
Even with law enforcement, the name never faded. Federal records show that in one police interview, Diddy's name was mentioned more than 40 times in connection with Tupac's tragic passing. Diddy's world isn't glitz and champagne anymore. It's falling apart piece by piece. Instead of being linked to platinum albums and all-night parties, his name is now tangled up in racketeering charges, T'ing and A. When federal agents raided his mansions, they didn't just uncover a few dirty secrets. What they reportedly found sent shockwaves, files marked with one word, Cuba.
They was in any of those tapes. If they played a in any of those Diddy sessions, they don't want it to get out to the general public to make up their brand.
That single word set off alarm bells because it ties right back to one of the longest-running rumors in hip-hop, the idea that Tupac never died in Vegas, that he slipped away to Cuba, the same island where his aunt, Assata Shakur, has lived in exile for decades. For years, fans have claimed to spot him there with a bald head, the familiar walk, the same piercing eyes, caught in shaky video clips on Havana streets. So here's the real question. Why on earth would Diddy have documents pointing to Cuba? Was it proof that he wasn't just connected to the incident, but also to keeping the truth about Tupac buried? And this isn't the first time Cuba has popped up in this story. Tupac's former bodyguard, Michael Nice, once swore he helped pull off the escape. His version sounded wild. Castro gave his blessing. A body double was swapped at the hospital. Tupac hopped on a jet to Barbados, and from there quietly made his way to Havana.
Had agreed with the doctor that he didn't have to witness the event, he could actually just turn his head, wash his hands or whatever. They quickly switched the bodies, one out of the ambulance, the Tupac, who'd recovered enough to get about fine by himself, he then transferred to the ambulance.
People laughed it off as fantasy, but then, right before he said he'd release evidence, Nice suddenly turned up dead. Now, years later, federal raids uncovered Cuban references in Diddy's files, and suddenly his fantasy doesn't sound so crazy anymore. And that's not the only thing that doesn't add up. How come nobody saw the hitman that night in the middle of the Vegas Strip? Why did the coroner's report get Tupac's height and weight wrong? Why did the cremator retire right after handling Tupac's body? Even Suge Knight himself once hinted that Tupac might still be alive. In 2014, he told TMZ, "Why do you think nobody has been arrested? 'Cause Pac not gone." One by one, these details might feel like coincidences, but stacked together, they start to paint a much bigger picture. A cover-up, a trail of deception that has lasted nearly 3 decades.
And the next step was to transfer him to an airstrip, again with a Hard Marks connection, one of his showbiz friends. We had a private plane waiting to get Tupac on board. So the next thing that happened was me and my brother met Tupac at the safe house.
And now Mopreme's words are echoing across headlines. He doesn't speak recklessly. He's careful, measured, but that only makes his doubts about Diddy hit harder. Because if he truly believed that Diddy was innocent, he'd just say it.
People is biased, you know. I get it. People, Big always gonna have somebody supporting him in some kind of way. You know, I think did work with Clark Kent a little bit. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, that's kind of and some need attention. Some need to be attention, need to be in the conversation, need to say something, but you still talking about.
Instead, he points to the shadows, the holes in the story, and repeats the same thing he's been saying for years. The truth will come out. Inside Diddy's courtroom battles, prosecutors are already running into dead ends. One of the women in the case, known in legal files only as Victim 3, has completely vanished. So much so that even her own lawyer can't get in touch. If witnesses can slip away in 2025 under this much public scrutiny, Imagine what could have happened back in 1996 when Tupac's case was fresh, and the stakes were higher, and the shadows were thicker. People can't help but ask, are we seeing the same playbook today that was whispered about in the 90s? A network that made inconvenient voices disappear, a system built to protect power. That's exactly why the Cuba theory refuses to die. Every time a new lead surfaces, every time another insider speaks, Havana finds its way back into the story. Could Diddy have known Tupac wasn't dead at all? That he had slipped away to the Caribbean, hidden in the same country where his aunt Assata Shakur still lives in exile? And if so, did Diddy use that secret as leverage, building influence while the world mourned someone who might not never have been buried? Federal raids on his homes only added fuel to that fire. Agents weren't just flipping through trophies and memorabilia, they were combing for something specific. Among the evidence logs, one phrase stood out: Cuba files. What could be inside? Payment records? Coded messages? Proof that Tupac boarded a plane instead of being carried to the morgue? Whatever the truth, it was considered sensitive enough to hide in plain sight. And here's where that shine completely falls off the bad boy brand. Behind the platinum plaques and the champagne-soaked parties, the label now looks more like a crime syndicate in designer suits. The East Coast-West Coast rivalry of the 90s suddenly feels small compared to what's surfacing. Prosecutors describe Diddy's notorious freak-offs not as wild parties, but as marathons of humiliation, where he allegedly coerced people into acts they didn't want, filmed it, and kept the footage as blackmail.
Stretch was down with Thug Life. You know what I mean? He was our East Coast, part of our East Coast fraction. You know what I mean? He produced some actual albums as well as the Thug Life album. You know, they were boys. They were boys.
Yeah, the way he did yeah, that was two-faced, man.
Layer in accusations of teeing, R-ing, and silenced witnesses, and the picture shifts from mogul to cult leader. Former associates paint the same picture. Bad Boy wasn't just a record label, it was a fortress. Inside, loyalty was demanded, debts were heavy, and saying no to Diddy could come with consequences. If that machine was already in motion in 1996, it's not hard to see how evidence could vanish, witnesses could clam up, and truth could be buried before daylight ever hit. That's why the Vegas case has always felt cursed. Now with federal agents tearing through his empire, the skeletons aren't just rattling, they're breaking the closet door down. And the most unsettling of all might be those so-called Cuba files. Just the mention of them sent conspiracy circles buzzing. Were they encrypted notes from the 90s, records of payouts to keep people quiet, or the holy grail of hip-hop mystery, proof that Tupac really did escape? For years, Havana locals have whispered about sightings. A man with the same build, the same walk, the same piercing eyes, glimpsed in a crowded alley, or sipping coffee in a backstreet cafe before disappearing again. If Diddy really had a stash of documents, recordings, or photos tying him to those rumors, it would mean far more than just curiosity. It would suggest he wasn't just a bystander, he was part of keeping the story buried. Maybe those Cuba files aren't just a label in a box. Maybe they're the missing link, the thread that ties rumor to reality. What makes all of this even stranger is when those so-called Cuba files showed up. They weren't uncovered in some old Vegas police box marked unsolved. They turned up in federal raids aimed at teeing and coercion. That timing suggests something bigger. Diddy's past and present might not be separate at all. It's almost like the mogul lifestyle and the criminal underworld overlapped, one protecting the other for decades. Now imagine investigators cracking those boxes open and finding direct links to Cuban contacts. The impact would be huge. A search meant to take down Diddy's current empire could accidentally blow open hip-hop's most famous mystery, what really happened to Tupac. But the bigger twist isn't just about the paper trails, it's about power. If those files are legit, then helping Tupac vanish wasn't something one man could pull off. It would have needed allies in high places, politicians willing to look the other way, networks moving money around, maybe even intelligence agencies keeping it quiet because it suited them. A cover-up like that doesn't survive 30 years on luck. It survives because people with influence want it that way, which raises a chilling question. How many powerful figures have been keeping this secret, and why? For Tupac's family, those files wouldn't just be answers, they'd be salt in the wound. Proof that he lived would also mean proof that the world was lied to. While fans mourned and turned him into a legend, insiders may have cashed in on shaping his story, owning his royalties, and controlling his legacy from the shadows. That kind of revelation wouldn't just tarnish reputations, it would blow up the very foundation of hip-hop's golden era.
Would have boxed him. would have loved to beat his ass in the ring, raise some money, and give it to the hood. It ain't have to be like this.
And hanging over all of this is Suge Knight, the man who sat behind the wheel the night shots were fired, the man who built an empire, then watched it burn. Now he's locked up, stripped of his power, with nothing left to lose, which makes him even more dangerous than ever. For years, Suge has dropped cryptic comments like breadcrumbs. In 2014, he even flat out claimed Tupac wasn't dead, asking why nobody had been arrested if that were true. If Mopreme is speaking out now, what happens if Suge finally unloads what he knows? Imagine him testifying, putting the pieces together, maybe even pointing the finger directly at Diddy. He'd have every reason to drag his rival down with him. If he's sitting on tapes, documents, or even just the unfiltered truth, the fallout wouldn't just shake the music industry, it would be catastrophic. And here's the scariest part. What if the rumors are real? If prosecutors prove Diddy wasn't just throwing wild parties, but running a full-on criminal syndicate, then nothing in his past stays off limits. Suddenly, the bounty whispers, the missing witnesses, the strange coroner's report, even the possibility of Tupac slipping away to Cuba, all of it gets pulled under the spotlight. Think about the headlines. Tupac alive, Diddy involved in cover-up. That wouldn't just take down a music mogul, it would rewrite the entire history of rap in real time. Every flashy interview, every denial, every stage performance, all of it would be replayed with suspicion. And the question everyone would be left asking isn't complicated at all. How far was he willing to go to keep the truth buried? And now we're standing on the edge of something huge. Mopreme's revelations feel like the first crack in the wall. Suge Knight might be holding the real explosives, and prosecutors are pulling at every thread they can find. Slowly, the puzzle that's been locked away for nearly 3 decades is starting to come apart. If Tupac really made it out of Vegas alive, and if Diddy had a hand in making the world believe otherwise, then this isn't just a scandal. It's the potential downfall of hip-hop's most untouchable empire. But here's where it turns personal. What do you think? Was Tupac truly taken that night under the glow of the Strip? Or has he been living in the shadows while others cashed in on his name and legacy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, because this story is far from over. In fact, it feels like it's only getting started. Until next time, keep your eyes open, your mind sharp, and never forget, the truth has a way of clawing its way back, no matter how deep it's been buried.